to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council members Gearboss, CO, McClellan, Tahar, and Dillon. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, City Superintendent Engineer Rubel. Is he here this evening?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Skull, DPW Director Fordyce, City Assessor Skull, and Police Chief Rennick. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, whether you're from staff or from the general public, we encourage you to sign up. The sign-in sheet is in the back to my left. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. I believe the clerk, passed out some supplemental material indicating that we will be convening into a closed session at the end of the regular meeting this evening and not reconvening into open session at the conclusion of that closed session. Is that correct, Clerk Royal? Very good.
Moved as amended.
All right, it's been moved by Councilman Seal to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. I'll get you on the next one, Ms. Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion to excuse the absence of Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Gearboss, seconded by Councilwoman Tahar. All those in favor of excusing the absence signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We have 3 presentations this evening. The first, I think, will begin with Chief Rennick, who has 2 important announcements related to the Saline Police Department. So, Chief Rennick, the floor is yours. I do not know where the cordless microphone is. Is it off to my left? You want to grab that for the chief? Thank you. Okay.
Well, good evening.
Wait,
Can everybody hear me? Do I need a microphone?
Yeah, I better use the microphone,
All right.
Chief.
They can hear you at home, Chief.
Yeah. How about now? Now? All right, we'll try this one. Thank you. All right, I actually have 2 presentations tonight. The first one is with a bit of sadness. Larry Wiedmeyer, if you'd come forward, please. For those of you who do not know Larry Wiedmeyer, I don't know how you don't know him. He has been around for years, and I don't want to steal any of the mayor's thunder, so I'm going to let him read a proclamation. But Larry's been a reserve officer for our police department for decades. And the mayor has a proclamation that I'm sure he wants to read. So, Mayor, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Chief Rennick. I'm going to go without the microphone. Okay. Good to see you, brother. All right, my friends, I'm going to read this letter of recognition in its entirety. And for those of you who do not know Larry, when I have finished reading this proclamation, you're going to be pretty impressed by the more than 4 decades of service, dedicated service to the city of Saline, specifically the Saline Police Department. So it begins, whereas Larry Wiedmeyer has dedicated over 44 years to public service in Saline and served under 5 police chiefs: Chief James Lovelett, Chief James Douglas, Chief Paul Button, Chief Mike Lindman, and Chief Larry Rennick. And whereas Mr. Wiedmeyer began as a reserve officer in May 1971, and was appointed a reserve sergeant in 1995. And he was responsible for the day-to-day operations of the reserve unit, where he has served with great distinction and commitment. And whereas Larry was a machinist for American Broach and Machine and for R&B Tool for nearly 37 years. And whereas Larry Wiedmeyer has volunteered for 15 years counseling patients who have had amputations at St. Joe Medical Center. And whereas Mr. Wiedmeyer has decided to retire from the Saline Police Department and spend more quality time with his family, which includes his wife, Kathy, and 2 children, Joe and Kim, 5 grandchildren, Ryan, Alex, Olivia, Gage, and Tanner. Now, therefore, I, Brian D. Morrow, Mayor of the City of Saline, on behalf of Saline City Council and the citizens of Saline, do hereby thank Larry Wiedmeyer for his dedicated service to the City of Saline and the Saline Police Department, and wish him, and with sincere best wishes, for a long, enjoyable, and prosperous retirement. and I set my hand and seal of this document on the 29th day of February 2016. Larry, congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me add this, my friends. Actually, let me start by saying this. This was framed in record time by my friends at Saline Pitcher Frame, the great Saline business. So I want to acknowledge that. But more importantly, since my tenure as a council member began, and then of course subsequent to that, mayor, Larry has become a friend, someone whose company I greatly enjoy, someone whose insights and opinions I have benefited from. And it's clear that he has demonstrated, well, more than demonstrated, he has committed a significant portion of his life to the Saline community, specifically making the Saline Police Department a stronger, more effective, more cohesive organization. And we are indebted to you for your service. I know we'll see you around, but keep in mind that we are eternally grateful for all that you've done. Let's give him one more round of applause.
You know, I started this journey 44 years ago, and it's been a journey. It's been a wonderful experience. I know I watched too much cop shows on TV before I came to work here at the Saline Police Department, and about 2 hours I found out that, boy, that's not it on television. But it's been a real learning experience, and I had a few things I wanted to accomplish. When I put on the uniform, I wanted to wear it with pride, and I wanted all of my people that I worked with to know that when I was in the car with them as a partner, that whatever we got into, I was there with them. And I think I accomplished all that, and so I'm very happy. And I thank everybody, everybody for making this dream come true for me. So, thank you.
Chief, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Okay, with the sad news of Larry leaving, we actually have some good news as well. Steve Magg, if you'd come forward, please. Steve Magg has been an officer here with the police department since 2002. He's a graduate with his Bachelor of Science degree from Grand Valley State University. He's also a Michigan Police Corps graduate. He's an emergency medical technician. He's been through Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2. Chief, you leave him alone. All right, he's staying with us. He's currently attending captain's school for the fire department as well. He's the department CPR and AED instructor. He's received a letter of commendation for exemplary service, and he's also a field training officer for the department. And most importantly, if you would, stand up in the back, Danielle, the father of a brand new daughter, Jordan. Apparently Jordan must be sleeping. Okay, Jordan's which is good for you, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, we have a tradition here. We're going to read the oath of office, and then we're going to have your wife put your badge on.
Actually, have you put it, because we're going to repeat.
Okay.
Are you ready? Yeah. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and that I will faithfully fulfill the duties
of the office of Police Sergeant
of the office of Police Sergeant
in and for the City of Saline,
in and for the City of Saline,
County of Washtenaw,
County of Washtenaw,
State of Michigan,
State of Michigan,
according to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Another tradition that we've started here at the Saline Police Department is if every police officer in the room would please stand. Or they're all standing already? Okay. Wonderful. All right, if you would raise your right hand as well. Steve, if you'd raise yours. And please repeat after me. On my honor,
On my honor,
I, and state your name,
I, Stephen Mag,
will never betray my badge,
will never betray my badge,
my integrity,
my integrity,
my character, or the public trust.
my character, or the public trust.
I will always have the courage
I will always have the courage
to hold myself and others accountable.
to hold myself and others accountable.
For our actions,
For our actions,
I will always uphold the Constitution
I will always uphold the Constitution
and the community I serve.
and the community that I serve.
Thank you. Danielle, this is your opportunity. She told me she's going to draw blood. We'll see. We like to include family with this because it's more than just what Steve does here at the department, because this does affect his family as well. So she's going to be removing his officer badge and putting on his sergeant badge. Let me first congratulate you, Sergeant Stephen Mag.
Thank you.
If you'd like to say a few words, this is your floor.
I just want to say that I'm extremely humbled and honored for this, and I am looking forward to meeting all the challenges that I know this position will end up having, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Rennick, and congratulations to both Larry and Steve. Appreciate y'all being here, including the officers and retired Saline Police Department personnel. Means a lot having you here. Next up on the agenda under presentations is an update on the cleanup on Monroe Street from Johnson Controls representative Mike Stolten. Mike, we're very honored, happy to have you with us here again, and I actually should note for the record, it was Mr. Stolten who reached out proactively and asked to be put on the agenda to provide an update, and we appreciate your attention and your commitment to remediating this property, sir. So thank you again. You have a PowerPoint presentation, is that correct?
I do.
Okay, and you may begin when ready.
Okay, I just need to unlock my computer.
Take your
Shouldn't
time.
take but a second. Good evening, and I want to provide an update to the City Council on my previous presentation that I did in November. I know many of you were here. Some members of the audience may have been here. So by way of update, I will provide some background, not as much as I provided last time, but I will provide some background on what happened previously and where we're at now, how we got here a little bit. The site, as many of you are aware, was an industrial site for over 100 years. Initially, it started out as a dairy. It was then acquired by Hoover Universal, particularly the part of Hoover Universal that was called Universal Die Casting. They did metals die casting as well as chromium plating at this facility. Johnson Controls purchased Hoover Universal in 1985. On the eve of that purchase, immediately prior to the purchase, a second company was created called Hoover Group. Hoover Group was created and operated the site until about 1990, at which time Hoover Group went bankrupt. In 2003, Johnson Controls was determined to be responsible because it was a successor to Hoover Universal. We were the last company standing. Conditions at the site were a result of the former owner's activities, and 232 Monroe was never operated or owned by Johnson Controls proper. Johnson Controls subsequently purchased and took ownership in late 2012. In 2015, the summer of, we undertook the removal of various surface debris, construction debris, foundations, and building materials for the site to prepare the site for remediation. Total amounts of material removed from the site were 12,599 tons of concrete, 1,629 tons of asphalt, 3,320 tons of solid wastes, of miscellaneous solid waste, 22,119 gallons of liquid waste, and that equates to 35,028,952 pounds of material that were removed. And that was in the time frame of approximately July through October 2015. And now comes to the part where I explain what's going on. I had originally told you that we were going to submit a corrective measures plan to the EPA, that the EPA would then review that, and that we would wait for approval of that plan from EPA to proceed with corrective measures, effectively remediation. We would execute those corrective measures. That consists right now of some soil contamination on the site, of some river sediments, and that would be undertaken in approximately the next 2 to 3 years based on EPA response and somewhat method dependent upon what we do on the site. We would then conduct site monitoring. We would confirm the corrective measures through sampling and perform a site closure with EPA. Only then could the site be redeveloped. So, what changed? And I'm going to tell you exactly what changed. I went home and thought about it. Okay? And I said, why do the people of the city of Saline have to wait? Quite honestly, I wasn't satisfied. Okay? And so I got with my consultant and I said, how can we do this? How can we make it faster? How can we eliminate the odor issue that some people experienced last year? How can we do that quicker? This was not caused by any of you calling me. It was not caused by my supervisors calling me and saying, hey, Mike, you need to do this faster. It was because of what I felt. I don't want the citizens of Saline to have to deal with the odors for the next 1 to 2 years before we can remediate. We have an option. Okay? The AOC, the administrative order on consent that we have with EPA, allows us to take an interim action to do it quicker on our own. We have some risk in doing that. And the risk is that we don't do exactly what they want and we have to do more later. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to move forward with a faster cleanup. We're going to move forward with remediation almost immediately. In fact, I received bids for the remediation work today. I anticipate being able to undertake that remediation sometime in the next 3 months to begin the process. We can perform interim actions unilaterally without the approval of EPA. We will inform them. We'll let them know what we're doing. We'll tell them all about what's going on, what the developments are, and what our plans are. We're going to address the VOC contaminated area, the area that caused the odors to come off the site. We're going to do that first. After that, we'll attack the metals contamination that exists at the site, and we'll more than likely begin groundwater monitoring within the next few months. River sediment remediation will most likely take place in the summer of 2017. That will be dependent upon a surface water permit that we obtain from the state of Michigan. So that is a little up in the air yet. Following that, we will conduct confirmation sampling. The confirmation sampling will be of soils, of groundwater, and of sediments in the river. Following completion of all remediation activities that are interim remediation activities, we will have to monitor the site for 1 to 2 years, and that usually involves just groundwater. After that, we will obtain site closure from the EPA. It's the same site closure whether we perform the remediation interimly or whether we wait for their approval. The site closure is the same. And then we'll have an opportunity to redevelop the site. Our future vision doesn't change. This is the same slide that I showed you in November. We're committed to performing whatever remediation is necessary per state and federal requirements. We have not yet determined the final use. It is planned as a non-residential property. We will deed restrict it before we release the property to anyone. And we will ensure that the property is used in a beneficial manner to the city and the residents of Saline. Do you have any questions?
Questions for our guest? This is done. Any questions? Comments? Well, I have a quick question, Mr. Stolten.
Sure.
And if I'm being obtuse and or if I missed something, my apologies. So you're going to begin work in the very near future.
Yes.
Will the organization, Johnson Controls, still submit a formal remediation plan to the Environmental Protection Agency?
Effectively, what we will do is we will submit a remediation plan that says the site's ready to be closed.
Okay.
We will continue interim remedial efforts until we're done.
Okay. And then they still, so,
So they still have the authority to say, no, you're not done.
okay.
You need to do more wherever.
Which leads me to a point I know I verbalized at previous meetings. Whenever Johnson Controls submits a remediation plan or a statement indicating that the site has been cleaned up to a satisfactory level, I think there's a collective interest in sending some sort of communique not only to the Environmental Protection Agency, but also to our federal elected officials saying, please work with the EPA, one, to be thorough, but also to move to resolve this expeditiously.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Mr. CEO, did you have a question, sir?
No, not a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much for your
You're
interest
welcome.
in the concerns of the community.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Let's begin with Ms. Tahar and then Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yes, I'd like to echo Mr. Seo's comment. I was one person who raised questions about...
It was your question that got me thinking.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for thinking, and thank you very much for the response.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that this is being proactive on your part. I never thought we'd get to this point, and you've made it an incredible site that now looks like something that when we come into town, we have the respect of seeing it, so I appreciate all the work you've done.
You're welcome. Thank you for John.
Let me just add, Mike, that, and I think I said this in November, we've come a long way from the first time you and I think one or two of your colleagues sat down with the city manager and I. If that wasn't in 2013, it was in 2014.
It was 2014.
2014, okay. You know, you've proven to be a man of your word, and we appreciate that. Please know that City Council and City staff will continue to do what we can, when we can, and more importantly, when it's appropriate, to assist you to be advocates and to be partners. Because we understand that remediation of this site is in our community's best interest. Specifically, it has a pretty profound impact on the quality of life of the surrounding area.
Sure. And just one note, you've probably seen in the news that Johnson Controls is changing, that there's a spin-off going on, that there's a corporate reorganization taking place, and just so you all know, this site will remain with me, will remain with our automotive group that's being renamed and being spun off, but it is fully half of Johnson Controls business right now. So we're still going to be financially viable. The reserves that we have set aside are still there. I looked at the bids that we have for the work. We're fine.
Very good. Thank you. We appreciate the update, appreciate your time. Safe travels. Anything else for our guest? No. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to, I think we need the screen up and the light still on, if I'm not mistaken. I am going to turn it over to our third presenter of the evening, which is Fire Chief Heft. The Fire Chief is actually present this evening at my request, and I don't want to steal any thunder from the Chief or from my colleague on the Fire Board, Councilwoman Janet Dillon. But at our next meeting, we'll be considering some, there'll be some action on the agenda relating to the Fire Department. What staff and what the Fire Board are recommending are something of, are changes. Growing the department, improving the department, I think ultimately improving officer safety while also better serving the residents whose interests the department is sworn to protect. So, again, not trying to be bombastic and long-winded here. Chief, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Now you gotta give me back. Sorry,
It's quite all right.
technology's not really big at the fire department yet, so
How many screens do
we
you
gotta
have?
go up a little bit. There you go. That's the one we want. So for you students, I want you to pay attention to this presentation, and this is why you have to pay attention in school, because I didn't apparently, so. Okay, so we can't get it to the big screen and make it move, so we have to deal with it like this, so I apologize. Okay, and I just want to give you a brief history of the fire department, and then my recommendation to put firefighters on. Bear with me, I have to read notes occasionally, so here we go. So our mission statement, this is something that we try to do every day. The training part is the easy part. It's getting out in the community and teaching our people fire prevention and education, and I think it's one of the best things we do. Our firefighters are into the schools. We teach all the first graders in the Saline schools what to do if there's a problem in their home or fire safety. We go to Safety Town. We visit the Saline Community Fair. We hold open house. So educating our youth is big on the list. We also go to our senior communities. We do fire drills with Brecken and the Mill Pond Manor. We provide CPR training to anybody that's interested. We do fire extinguisher training to our industry for those that need it. So this is a big on our list. So over the years, the Saline Fire Department's grown to accommodate the changing needs of Saline. From a handful of men with buckets to the purchase of a bell and a pump, which I'll get to later, and the establishment of the fire department formed in 1974 when we went to an area fire department. In fact, in 1974, when they did that, Mayor George Anderson was a big leader in that. He came up with a formula that we use today and many other fire departments use to come up with the percentages of what communities pay. So it's held the test of time. So, and here's some facts that a lot of folks in Saline probably don't know. They probably think we're just the Saline Fire Department. They might not know that we cover 90 square miles. The city of Saline, Lodi Township, Saline Township, and half of York Township, the north half. It's over 21,000 people. And as you can see, there's a lot of different kinds of buildings, churches, schools, 3 retirement communities now, many homes and apartments. And also, we have a major pipeline that runs through our fire area. We have the Forensic Center, the State of Michigan's Forensic Center, and we also have US 12, which at any time, anything could be on it. So we have a lot to look after. We also, just our infrastructure is myself, a chief. We have an office manager, Carol Chapman. She's right here at the city of Saline. We have 1 station. Last year, we had approximately 1,100 calls for service. We do that with 6 full-time firefighters, 14 paid on call or part-time. We do it with 1 engine, 2 tankers, a heavy rescue, a medical response vehicle, a brush truck, the ATV rig that's for brush fires or rescue that's off-road. And then we have a utility vehicle, which is a Toyota pickup that they graciously donated to us last year. So we're very fortunate to have good folks in the community. And our budget this year was $906,000. We have a capital fund that has $272,000 in it. We have a fund balance of $191,000, and all of our equipment is paid in full. Additional revenue, just like everybody else, we try to find all the grants we can. We've been very fortunate with federal grants over the years, over $200,000 worth. We also have our Friends of the Saline Area Fire Department, which has raised now over $300,000, and that's one that the community gives to. Our community is very generous to the fire department. Every time we have some kind of fundraiser, the people are there to help us. So you can see all the different things we've been able to purchase with that money. These are milestones. In 1982, they purchased the first fire truck here in Saline, and that's because of a fire in 1981 that I'll get to here in a second. They purchased a fire bell, which was kind of something they used instead of a siren back in the day. 1967, they built the station that we're now in. 74, they established the area fire department. And then in 1999 was the year that they hired me as full-time fire chief. And I was very honored for that, especially to be a hometown boy. And I've also been a part of the fire department since 1978. I was pretty young when I got on. And there's a long history of hardworking people that have given lots of hours to the fire department. I'm proud to be one of them. So I brought this up. You know, a lot of people talk about the volunteerism in Saline in general, that everybody's always giving and willing to put in the time. And I feel like it might have started in 1881 when there was the fire in downtown Saline where 22 buildings burned. In fact, if you go to the Historical Society's website and you get on the menu, click on the fire of 1881, it's a great story. And the part that got me was this lady and apparently another lady and her daughter. So all the buildings, if you could picture the buildings where Macs are, that whole row, and then all the way up the street to the new restaurant on the corner of Henry Street, all those buildings were burning. Well, where Brecken Grill is started to catch fire. So this lady and these other folks grabbed their buckets, went over, started a bucket brigade, and were able to put that fire out and save that building. Otherwise, it had been going down the other side of the street. So that's quite a story, and it's, to me, that's what Saline's all about. Other way. So since that time, we've had a robust volunteer force comprised of folks that were all locally employed. Some of you might remember some of these. Ted's Service, they had like 4 firefighters on that. That's now with the tire shop. Bridgewater Lumber, Lighthizer's Restaurant. Kind of miss some of that food now. And then, of course, there were other places like R&B Tool, forever had 3 or 4 people. R.G. Wall, he was the chief, and him and his son both were on the fire department. So there were, all the community kind of was on the fire department. So when the whistle blew, everybody responded, and that's where we're. Well, with time comes change, and businesses were sold, people retired, and the fire service in Saline changed along with everything else. So until recently, we've been very grateful to have a solid base of firefighters that worked in our community every day. The community's changed. Most citizens from our area commute out of town to their jobs. The businesses I mentioned before have closed, been sold, or are gone completely. In approximately 1996, we became a full-service fire department, responding to fires, motor vehicle accidents, and medical emergencies, which were new at the time. So our run numbers went up, and the ability to have employees leave their job more often caused some stress at local businesses. So as businesses changed, less and less firefighters worked in town, which in turn reduced the numbers of responders at critical times. With that came the training involved to be a firefighter. There was a time back in the day, like in my day, if you went to the station and the boots and the coat fit, you were on the fire department. But it's not so today. The state requires that all
full-time firefighters or volunteer firefighters have certifications, and it's quite a commitment. It could take a couple of years to complete. So in the 90s, there were concerns, so the department hired a consultant to review the department to give us some direction on what we should do next. One of the top items was to hire a full-time paid chief so he could work on policy and find direction for the department. In 1999, I was hired. For the first year, I worked on a plan to hire our first full-time firefighters. In 2001, we hired 3 firefighters with a plan to hire 3 more in 2002. We did it this way to keep the numbers down and manageable for the budgets. It has been a good formula, responding with only 2 duty firefighters and the paid-on-call responding with the next needed equipment. Slowly over time, our numbers per response have fallen, and I feel it's time to add 3 firefighters, 1 for each shift. In fact, we all have to report to the National Fire Incident System, and so I looked at some data, and in 2013, 2014, and 2015, 15 I couldn't get everything because it wasn't out at that time, but just a couple facts. In 2013, we had 260 fire-related calls. Of those calls, only 27 times did we have 6 or more firefighters respond. In 2014, we had 346 fire-related calls. Of those calls, only 39 times did we have 6 or more firefighters respond. So you can kind of see a trend we have. Let me show you. I put this picture up here. Some of you may recognize that's Rolly Goltz and Ray Alber, kind of some old icons at the fire department and the city of Saline, actually. So we are very fortunate to have a force that is dedicated, well-trained, experienced, and committed to the community. They do have a life, they have jobs, families, and all of that can prohibit response to calls. By adding a firefighter each shift, we can be sure to get the manpower or equipment to the scene quickly without affecting our response time. We will enhance our production at a scene immediately on arrival, whether it's firefighting or performing CPR. And then I just want to leave you with a quote that I've always liked. So that's it. You can ask your questions now if you have any.
Very good, Chief. And the clerk and/or city manager can remind me, this will be an action item on our next council agenda on the 14th. Is that correct? So they'll see a little bit more detail in terms of the numbers and the impact on the budget. But I certainly thought it was important to have you come and debrief us on this issue in advance of that. I think Councilwoman Dillon concurred with that assessment. Do you have anything you want to add as the second representative on the Saline Area Fire Board?
Not at this time.
Okay, very good. Any questions for the chief? Mr. Gearball, please.
Just with us improving this or adding more staff, we're actually going to have an improvement on our insurance rate too, right?
We could get another ISO rating, yep. Once we get the firefighters, then we can call them and have them come back. And it should, probably more so in the townships. You know, the city, I think we're at a 5 right now, but in the townships, if they're outside 5 miles, it's 9. But if you put more trucks on the road quicker, they can raise that, which is significant in the township.
So you aren't anticipating a lot more new equipment or anything at this time?
No, we are not. No. Everything's on a schedule, and I don't know if I had the capital projected plan in your packet or not, but the next truck is probably 6-7 years down the road.
So really, we're just trying to cover ourselves from the loss of people.
Exactly. Yep.
Any other questions? Well, sort of to piggyback on that, and you know, you have alluded to this, and we've discussed it on numerous occasions at fire board meetings and at the budget work meeting where these changes were suggested. The volunteer system isn't working the way it did 25 or 30 years ago, and that's not unique to Saline. That's happening throughout the state, throughout the region, throughout the country. And so I think your suggested changes are practical. They're more than reasonable, and as I said in my opening statement, ultimately will benefit the public, but of equal importance, improve the safety of those firefighters who respond in the event of an emergency. So since this is in the public's interest, I'll note for my colleagues, I'm planning another coffee hour in early April. We haven't announced the date yet, but I've asked the chief to join me as my special guest to share some information to members of the public who may be interested in this. And actually, we should all be interested in this, because in the event that we have to call 911 or deal with the fire department, we want to make sure that the department is adequately staffed with professional, trained first responders to deal with our emergencies. So appreciate you being proactive on this and taking time out of what I believe is your normal training night to be with us.
There you are.
Okay. Anything else for the chief? Chief Heff, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, moving on the agenda, we come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? No citizen comments. Then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tahar. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to public hearing, item 16-43. This is special land use at 1205 Industrial Drive. The first motion will be a motion to open the public hearing at 8:21 p.m.
So moved?
Moved by Councilmember Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The public hearing is now open, affording anyone from the public an opportunity to speak on the special land use at 1205 Industrial Drive. Anyone who would like to speak?
Move to close.
Move to close the public hearing at 8:22 p.m. by Councilmember Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Seal. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Public hearing is now closed. This third motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 1st, 2016 memo from the Saline Planning Commission, and to approve or not to approve the special land use to allow for artistic instruction, photography, art studio, and art sales at 1205 Industrial Drive.
Move to acknowledge receipt and to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any comment on behalf of the Saline Planning Commission this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. The applicant actually is here tonight, and that's Mr. Rensler, and his mother's here also. Art runs in the family. And the matter was well discussed and accepted and approved by the Planning Commission, and certainly is in keeping with the city's interest in expanding the arts and cultures in the community.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for our city superintendent, engineer? No? Mr. Gearba, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you want to make any comment? Mr. Rubel said it well. He was quite clear and succinct, but you're the council rep on the Planning Commission?
No, I think we were hoping to be able to use different types of activities in our other buildings that we know. As long as our industrial activity is decreasing, we need to figure out ways to redo this. Special uses are allowed in this type of area, which Gary Rubel has told us. It does raise the question of what we originally intended for the property, but at this point, I think this is one of the ways we have to start moving to keep our businesses and our activities in our town.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearba. If there's nothing further from Mr. Rubel, we appreciate your time. Any subsequent discussion on this? And we thank the applicant and his mother for joining us this evening. If there's no further discussion, it's been properly moved by Gearba, seconded by McClellan, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-44. This is Run for Your Life 5K Community Event Application. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the American Cancer Society, ACS, application for a community event / use of public ways for a Run for Your Life 5K, and to acknowledge receipt of the February 9th, 2016 email from Police Chief Rennick, the February 16th, 2016 email from DPW Director Fordyce, and to approve or not to approve the community event application, to waive or not to waive the estimated DPW fees in the amount of $135 and the estimated police fees in the amount of $674.60.
I'll move to acknowledge, to approve, and not waive the fees.
It's been moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge, to approve, and to not waive the fees. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tahar. Does the city clerk care to make any comment at this time?
I did want to let you know that last year they were also did the run, and they had estimated the same, pretty close to the same amount for the police and the DPW, and it only wound up costing $61.39. So it was, they estimate high, and hopefully this will also be a lower amount.
Very good. Is anyone representing the applicant here? Oh, Ms. Ragland, thank you. Do you want to make any comment at this time?
I just want to say, Karen Ragland, representing Relay for Life, so it's American Cancer Society and also all the community participants. The event was very, very successful last year, and the 5K did make a big difference in just motivating people and getting them, sort of charged up for the rest of the day. So, as stated earlier, we didn't ask to have, or we didn't get the fees waived last year. We did pay them, and it was very generous that they were able to come in lower than budget. So we hope we're able to do the same this year. Although Chief Rennick did advise me, he may not be able to get the same cadets out there, but he'll do his best to make sure, keep the cost low.
Very good.
So, thank you.
Karen, we appreciate your time and your work on this important community event. Any discussion from council? No? Okay. Well, it's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Tahar, to acknowledge, to approve, and not to waive the fees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-45. This is proposed ordinance number 781, zoning amendment change 110 East Henry Street. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 1st, 2016 memo from Assistant City Clerk Dahan, and to accept or not to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation, and to approve or not to approve the proposed ordinance number 781, an ordinance to change the zoning at 110 East Henry, Lot 25, Assessor's Plot number 3, from R2 two-family residential to D2 downtown edge. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge, accept, and approve.
Okay.
Second.
You're on fire with moving the motions tonight, Mr. Gearbaugh. That was a second by Ms. McClellan? Okay, very good. Mr. Rubel, do you care to make a comment this evening on behalf of the Saline Planning Commission?
I will keep it brief again. Mr. Heisler's here representing the project. As you know, both the site plan and the zoning amendment cleared the Planning Commission with good comments and remarks, and our planner performed the reviews for both of those and utilized master plan and site plan requirements to show that the project was viable and appropriate for the area.
Very good. We appreciate that. Are there any questions for our city superintendent, engineer? No? Mr. Heisler, we appreciate you being here this evening. Do you care to make any comment?
No, unless there's some questions. I think Gary summed it up fine.
Very good. Okay. Any questions or comments from the dais? Let me just say on behalf of the Planning Commission, and I would welcome the thoughts and comments of Mr. Gearbaugh. We're very excited about this project. It's been on the last two Planning Commission agendas. We had a pretty robust discussion as a group, but we think this is going to be a nice addition to the community and expand the housing options in the downtown area. So we appreciate Mr. Heisler's commitment, and needless to say, Peters Building has done great work in the Saline community for the past several decades, and we appreciate, or we expect nothing less of this most recent project. If there's nothing further, Mr. Gearbaugh, do you want to add anything?
No, just to say that this zoning is appropriate from where we've decided that we wanted to try and have a type of oversight that allows us with this overlay to give some of the development that's appropriate for the downtown and add to the features and things that we think are appropriate in that area. There are some other zonings that could have been there, but at this point, because of the way the city is designed and where that location and the type of property is, this is the best design, best zoning for this piece of property.
Mr. Heisler, if I may invite you to the podium for just a second. The one unique aspect of this project which you may wish to comment on is, of course, all developers want to move expeditiously on their projects. You really want to move quickly on your project because of the Michigan Avenue makeover. Do you want to comment on that briefly?
Yep, that is correct. Everyone was very cooperative and, we were following all the procedures, but reviewing it because we do have to be out in Henry Street and we've already ordered the manholes and everything, so we can start the week of the 21st at the latest. And right now, we've been talking with MDOT and working back and forth, and we should, even if we do have a wet spring, our work should be completed well in advance of when the traffic will be rerouted for the summer detour.
Very good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. If there's nothing further then, it's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan to acknowledge, to accept, and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-46. This is resolution opposing House Bill 5232 and Senate Bill 720, historic districts. This will be a motion to approve and adopt or not to adopt the resolution opposing House Bill 5232 and Senate Bill 702, or 720, excuse me.
Move to approve and adopt?
Let's go Dillon as the mover and CO as the second. Clerk Royal, you worked on this, as did our staff liaison to the Historic District Commission, Mr. Fordyce. Do either one of you care to make a comment this evening?
Well, it has gone before the Saline Area Historical Society, and they have approved it, and it will go before the Saline Historic District next week.
Very good.
So once everybody has signed it, we will forward it on.
And I understand that Councilwoman Dillon, as the council rep to HDC, was also able to take a look at this in advance of it being included as part of the packet.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Mr. Gearbock, please.
Just a question about it. There was a tweak, I thought, to this in the last week or so in terms of another introduced amendment or something to it. I don't remember what the number was, but something to try and change how the oversight board or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what, it's still a forward legislation, but I
Right.
just want to make sure we cover our bases.
Yeah, there was an amendment offered, but I believe it was an amendment to these bills. So the bill numbers are still the same. It just has some slight language changes. And both I believe the MML and MHPN have equally come out strongly opposed to the amended legislation as well. So it still has the basic flaws in it that the original bills did.
Just from my perspective of being on the Historical Society, the entire group expressed their concern of this, that out of all the things that we've attempted to try and do in trying to preserve our historic past and looking at things that we have put in place to try and keep and preserve our community and the ideas of tradition and moving forward and economic benefit, both these bills in terms of how they would affect the historic preservation and the ability for us to govern our own selves is such a detriment at this point in time of what they've attempted to try and do because of one single neighborhood in Grand Rapids, East Grand Rapids, as an attempt to try and make this something to apply across the entire state is one of the reasons that at this point in time I am so supportive of this motion at this point. It's just another directive of we need to understand what is happening in Lansing, and they don't seem to be getting it.
Very good. Additional comment? I would note that, assuming the motion passes, and I hope that it does, please make a point to sign the resolution before you leave this evening, because I know the clerk's office wants to process it and get it in the mail to Senator Warren, State Representative Driscoll, and then Governor Snyder. If there's nothing further on this motion, it's been properly moved by Dillon, seconded by CO to approve and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-47, request for Judy Ivan grant. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 14th, 2016 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not to approve the request to apply for a $5,000 grant to the Judy Ivan Healthy Communities Endowment to purchase and install a play structure at Brecken Park.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tahar, and that's seconded by Councilman CO. Thank you. Director Scruggs was unable to be here this evening, but I think Mr. Campbell can make a brief comment and then entertain any questions that the group has.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Ms. Scruggs' memo shows, this request for a Judy Ivan grant of $5,000 would add to the, for lack of a better term, kind of a running total of, you may recall, this whole initiative was kicked off by a local fourth grader, Donovan Gillow, who's done a tremendous job, he and his family raising some local dollars. And so, to date, they've raised approximately $2,500. The city was able to utilize that and leverage that for $10,000 for a CARES grant. The city has also budgeted in the current fiscal year budget $22,000 set aside for improvements in this park. So that would bring it, if we were successful with the Judy Ivan grant request, would bring it to a current total of about $39,500. Now the play structures are extremely expensive, especially if you want to get something worth, so a lot of folks can utilize it. So I know the Parks Commission has, a couple months ago, they were brainstorming on possible fundraising as well as the idea of utilizing in-kind services to help reduce the overall cost, such as potentially partnering with maybe a local contractor that could do some of the ground preparation work and that type of thing. So the hope is that this will add to it, and so hopefully we can accomplish this goal of a new play structure here in the very near future.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And I should actually note that my office received a letter from the Gillow family, specifically Donovan Gillow, actually just today, with a few checks from community members designated for this project that I turned over to the treasurer's office. So this young man and his family are still very enthusiastic about seeing improvements made to Brecken Park, and I think that's wonderful. So are there any questions for City Manager Campbell? Oh, Ms. Dillon, please.
What is the actual cost for the play structure?
Well, there's not one specific, but as far as the one that I know that Donovan had hoped for was north of $100,000. So that's why I say that they're pretty expensive, even so to get something significant enough that can provide enjoyment, if you will, for a number of folks. So that's why but some of that cost, like I said, is contributed by preparation and that type of thing. So the hope is to be able to bring some of those costs down, and I know there are some play structure companies that have offered, and they're always offering, some deals and some cost reductions. So we'll see what happens as we go forward, but that's kind of where we're at.
And what is the time frame for installation?
Well, and again, until we don't have one. I mean, the sooner the better. But because we don't have enough funds currently, unless we are to get a good deal and have some in-kind services. I mean, our hope is that we get it done this fiscal year, but it may end up being next year.
Okay. Is this grant perpetual, so we don't have a time frame to spend it?
I believe, similar to the CARES, they give you up to a year, a couple of years to spend it.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Any subsequent discussion? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Tahar, seconded by Seo to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-48, parking easement and storm sewer easement at 237 Monroe Street. Motion A will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 19th, 2016 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the parking easement on the southerly portion of 237 Monroe Street and to authorize a one-time payment in the amount of $2,500.
I'll move to acknowledge receipt of the memo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Mr. Campbell, do you want to go over your memo and then we'll open it up for questions from the group?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This staff has been working on this for a while. Reference parking for the new Salt Springs Park. As we all know, there's not, I mean, it's a difficult piece of property, it's landlocked, and there's not really one great way to access it. Excuse me. What's been proposed is that as part of our Phase 2 improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, there'll be new security fencing and such put up, so they would allow for a pathway, an entrance pathway between the fencing and the edge of the river. But certainly we want to encourage people to go and experience the new park. However, there's no parking available, and so this would be on the southern end of 237 Monroe, that's owned by Saline River Properties, that we would have a parking easement in perpetuity, so we could construct a simple but positive and effective parking lot to provide parking for Salt Springs. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Mr. Gearbow, did you have a question, sir?
Yeah,
Or
I guess,
several?
Several, I guess.
Please.
And this may partake with even the other one, I guess, for both the parking, and you talked about a sewer easement? I thought I read that in
Yes.
association with this.
Yes.
I guess I was trying to understand the need for the sewer easement at this point for the other property. I was thinking we had just gone through a site plan review of that and didn't come up at that time when we just did something about 6 months ago. Maybe Gary Mr. Rubel can address that.
Mr. Rubel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Mr. Gearbaugh mentioned the site plan was in front of the Planning Commission, and the storm sewer plan for retaining it was part of the site plan. And so then, at that point, it was a matter of where the discharge would be located. That may not have been settled at that time because we were not working with the possibility of the easement and a straight route to the river versus going and digging up the street. So this prevents or saves us from digging up the street, conflicting with utilities out there.
Okay. And that was one of my questions. I was trying to figure out that we both are going to benefit from this. I was trying to see why one was $1 and the other one's $2,500. But based on the fact that we won't have to rip up the street, that would make a little more sense for me.
Any other questions, sir?
Nope.
No? Okay. Very good. Mr. Seal, please.
I'm not real clear on the parking arrangement. Is this parallel parking or angle parking?
Why don't you just hang tight at the podium
It's,
there in the event there are more
actually,
questions.
it's neither. It's perpendicular parking to the driveway. Just as you pull into a parking lot, drive in, and then you would back up and pull out.
Okay, how many cars would it accommodate?
I think there's about 20 or 22.
Oh, okay.
And one barrier-free per ADA rules.
Good.
Any other questions? No? Okay, maybe, I guess you can relinquish the podium, sir. Thank you. Any subsequent discussion? Of course, we're just entertaining a motion to acknowledge receipt. So if there's nothing further, we'll proceed to vote on that. It's been moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. How about a motion to approve or not to approve the parking easement on the southerly portion of 237 Monroe Street and to authorize a one-time payment of $2,500?
I'd move to approve and authorize.
Thank you, Councilman Seal. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. Any discussion? No discussion? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Motion B is a motion then to approve or not to approve the storm sewer easement on the southwest corner of 247 Monroe Street.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Staff care to make any comment on this? I don't think it's necessary. No? Okay. Any comments? No? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 14-134. This is wastewater treatment improvements, Phase 2, payment number 6. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 11th, 2016 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel and to approve or not to approve the contractor's application for payment number 6 in the amount of $192,356.13.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilman Seal. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Tar. Mr. Rubel and/or Mr. Skull, do you care to make any comments?
Even though work was suspended for the winter, and we didn't think there would be another construction payment, the contractor did receive and store materials that were put on order, came in early. So due to the contract provisions, he's able to apply for a percentage of the stored materials, and Tetra Tech verified that. And then they prepared the pay request you see before you tonight.
Very good. Mr. Skull, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just real quick, there has been some forward movement on this. They did install a control panel and started running wires for the future SCADA system and future equipment. And while I have your ear, I am following up on the odor scrubber, the Dual. The fabrication is completed, and we're looking for the installation in the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Perhaps either you could send a memo or be present at our next council meeting to maybe give us an additional update on that?
Sure.
Okay, very good. Any questions for these two gentlemen regarding motion 14-134? No? Okay, gentlemen, appreciate your time. Any subsequent discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Tahar, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-49, Rentschler Farm Historic Preservation Consultant. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 24th, 2016 memo from DPW Director Fordyce and to approve or not to approve the recommendation to award the contract for Rentschler Farm Condition Assessment Report and Salvage Barn Plans and Specifications to Quinn Evans Architects in the amount of $48,500 after review and approval of the contract and documents by the city attorney.
Move to acknowledge receipt and to approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tahar. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Mr. Fordyce, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is a continuation of our process of applying for a certified local government grant to help make improvements at the Rentschler Farm Museum. 2 years ago, we applied for a grant to actually do some repair work there, and we did not win that grant, partially because we did not prepare specifications in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. So we applied for, the State Historic Preservation Office at that time recommended that we apply again to request funding for a condition assessment report, and then I massaged it so that we would also get specifications and plans for the repairs to the salvage barn that we originally applied for. So we received that grant. The grant will provide $33,000 to hire a certified historic preservation architect to perform this assessment report and prepare those plans and specifications that we can use for a future grant application. The city match on that $33,000 is $22,000. It's a 60-40 match. I put together a request for proposal to get that qualified professional, and we received 7 proposals. We had a mandatory walkthrough at the farm, so all the consultants were able to see the farm and knew what they were getting into. 4 that we received exceeded the budget, so I eliminated those from further consideration. There were 3 remaining. I evaluated those based on the criteria that had been included in the RFP and awarded points in each of the categories in there. And the the highest point earner was Quinn Evans Architects, who were located up in Ann Arbor, and sent my review to SHPO for them to look at the process that I went through, and they concurred with the process and the selection, and so here we are today. That's their proposal was $48,500, so that will proportionately reduce the $22,000 that the city's committed to match.
Good. Thank you for your report. Questions for our DPW director? Mr. Seal.
Yes, sir. Mr. Fordyce, what is the potential amount of the grant that we might receive as a result of this application?
If we're successful in a grant for repairs to the salvage barn, I expect to be in this same ballpark, another 30, perhaps more, maybe up to 50 for the future grant. Some of the rehabilitation grants they award are more substantial than that, but for our project, I suspect would be in that $30,000 to $50,000 range.
Additional questions, Mr. Seal?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Mr. Gearbaugh.
I appreciate Mr. Fordyce's due diligence on this. It's been a hard process even to just get it through SHPO and everything, and it's been almost a year and a half or so forth. This is one of those type of situations where if you want to get the money, you have to have a plan. And without the plan, you won't get the money. And unfortunately, we have to contribute that kind of support. So the idea is that we will get reimbursed over the long period. We're hoping that not only the salvage barn, but there are other roofs out there, there are other things that, potentially are going to happen out at the farm. And as long as we have it, and we have this kind of detailed plan set forward, we'll be able to get more funding without having to go back on the taxpayers as much as that we have always anticipated in the past. I'd like to see at some point something similar done for the depot, because we have issues there and so forth. And I think we're talking about a master plan, so we'll probably end up doing something similar for both the depot and the new lot that we purchased. The idea is that we will try to get these to become more self-sufficient.
So these plans then carry beyond just the initial grant application?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
They'll be used, the example of the Sharon Hollow, the mill, which basically has had a plan that developed 20 years ago, and they've used that for the whole thing, for all the funding and support that they've used. So this is a good stepping stone for us.
Thank you for that explanation.
Additional comments or questions? Mr. Fordyce, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that as we've worked toward this point, I've especially valued the fact that this will give us the long-term plan as something to work with over the long haul. I think that's really valuable.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Fordyce, thank you. If there's nothing further, we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Tahar, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-24. This is 2016-2020 Parks and Recreation Master Plan Resolutions. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 23rd, 2016 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve and adopt or not to approve the 2016-2020 Parks and Recreation Master Plan Resolution.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. Mr. Campbell, do you care to make a brief statement, sir?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all may recall, City Council considered the approval and ultimately approved the Parks and Rec Master Plan update. And unfortunately, because of some miscommunications, the thought was that the resolution of support for the approval was that the Parks Commission did earlier was sufficient. However, that's not the case, and so that's why staff is bringing it back before you, this resolution, to adopt the resolution of approving the new Parks and Rec plan.
It's mainly a housekeeping thing.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions for the city manager? Any discussion? Mr. Seal.
I guess I'm just still confused by that, Mr. Campbell. I'm reading the approved minutes from the February 1st meeting. It says acknowledge receipt of the memo from Parks Commission Recording Secretary to approve and adopt the 2016-2020 City of Saline Parks and Recreation Master Plan as submitted. Was there something wrong with the submission? Is that it?
No, what was lacking was, included in that was the resolution that the Parks Commission had adopted. And again, miscommunication with our consultant. The thought was that was sufficient, but it needed to be just more than a motion from City Council. City Council actually has to adopt a resolution approving it, and the City Council did not adopt their own resolution.
Bookkeeping.
So, but as the mayor's stated, it's housekeeping.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? It is what it is. If not, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Councilwoman McClellan to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. We'll start at this end. Ms. McClellan, do you have any commissioner, committee, or task force reports?
Yep, the Saline Youth Council is collecting nomination forms for the Saline Youth of the Year, I believe it is.
Yep.
So if you have any nominations, there's, I think, a form in everybody's mailbox. There should be, or so.
I'm sure you can get the form from Jody Roberts, the recording secretary, staff liaison.
Yep.
Okay,
I
very
think she
good.
was going to put them in people's mailboxes.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else then?
I think that's it for now.
That'll do it. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Planning Commission kicked off a work or task force on our master plan for the next 5 years or 10 years, whatever, consisting of Bill Beardsley, myself, and Catherine Skull, and our planner Doug Luan, basically to try and update our current master plan for going into the future. And it's amazing when we look at it, what things have been accomplished, from our overlay district to getting buildings built on school property and so forth. So if there's any ideas or things that you see in our current master plan that you as council members feel you'd like to have addressed or brought forward, there are some new ideas that are coming about, housing and so forth. Please feel free to contact myself or members of planning.
Very good. Any other commission, committee, or task force reports, Mr. Gearbaugh?
No.
No? Mr. Har?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Nothing from you. Ms. Dillon?
Nothing.
Nothing at this time?
No.
Mr. Seal?
Nothing, sir.
Very good. How about reports or other announcements? Mr. Seal, please.
Two things, very quickly. I have here a disc from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and I put it in my computer and looked it over. It's a voluminous report on a pipeline that's proposed to be built. I don't know if anybody else got this or not, but before I discarded it, I wanted to see if anybody had use for this.
Why don't we, in the event, I believe I did receive that. I haven't taken a look at it. I'll be very candid. But I did receive it. Sounds like Councilwoman McClellan saw it as well. Why don't you pass it along to the city clerk? She can keep it in her file for the time being. If there's another council member or member of staff who'd like to take a look at it, they can contact her.
Very good. As a second issue, I see where apparently the House has illustriously renewed their effort to reinforce the gag law, as it's called, and passed it on to the Senate. I don't know what the action is in the Senate at this point in time, but I don't know if we need to consider passing another resolution in opposition to this renewed action.
I don't believe it's been, the first question you raised regards action taken in the Senate. To my knowledge, it hasn't been acted upon yet in the Senate, but we can confirm that. In the event that it has been or has not been acted upon in the Senate, we could certainly still pass a resolution that could be sent to members of the state Senate and or the governor, encouraging him to veto the legislation. Now, I began my remarks by saying it wouldn't hurt, but at the same time, this legislature and the governor have shown a great propensity to not give a damn, if you'll pardon the expression, what local units of government and local elected officials think and feel about issues pertinent to their municipality. But that having been said, I'm still happy to consider a resolution if that would be the wish and desire of City Council.
Yeah, I think whatever we can do on it. I mean, what my understanding is that all they really kind of did was modify 2 words and kind of said concise and clear or accurate or something like that, which can be interpreted however. It is the intent of the whole bill that it's just something to try and not keep the public informed as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and I think the other point that's worth adding, Councilman Seal, that Mr. Campbell and I previously discussed is that, of course, the issue itself in the original legislation is in litigation. It's in the courts right now.
Correct.
So this whole issue is very much in limbo and fluid. So how it will develop is anyone's guess at this juncture. But again, if it's council's wish to consider another resolution, I'm happy to work with staff to put that on the agenda.
Perhaps we should monitor it. If it looks as if they're trying to squeak around even the federal injunction or the federal lawsuit, perhaps then it would be appropriate to send a letter to the governor or wherever else would be appropriate to try and stopgap the activity.
Why don't we add this then as a discussion item on the 14th, and staff can give us an update on where that legislation is at in the, within the system.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other reports or announcements? Actually, I have two. I'll start with the one that also relates to our legislature. I received notification, and some of you may have as well, regarding some pending legislation. I do not believe it's been introduced yet. It may be a bipartisan package coming from the leadership of the House Committee on Local Government. It's a DDA TIF reform package to really improve oversight. My opinion, based on the talking points and data I received, is that it's not particularly warranted or necessary. But I will note that at this juncture, what's being proposed is fundamentally different than legislation that was introduced last session by Representative Kowal out of Western Oakland County, which would essentially dismantle DDAs and TIFs by allowing an opt-out, which would destroy them effectively. So I did speak to the city manager and to Attorney Smith about the, again, it's not legislation because it hasn't been formally introduced yet, but the concept, the theory. And I'll be able to provide, and/or staff or legal counsel will be able to provide a more in-depth analysis at our next meeting. And perhaps those bills will be introduced. Again, if what's being articulated mirrors the substance, it's fairly innocuous, even though, again, I don't think it's particularly necessary, but certainly better than dismantling DDAs and TIFs, which would be detrimental to Saline and a whole host of communities across the state of Michigan. So, the only other thing I would note, and I thought it was successful, I thought it was a good first start, was I had a health and wellness forum, I believe on the 11th of February, about 2 weeks back on a Thursday morning. Council members Tahar, Dillon, and CO were present, along with representatives from St. Joe Mercy Health System, Evangelical Homes of Michigan, our own Parks and Rec Department, the Senior Center, and a number of other first responders and people and organizations who focus on long-term care and the medical needs of our community. Again, I thought it was a good initial meeting, a pretty robust discussion, and I'm in the process of scheduling a second Community Health and Wellness Forum, which will happen most likely the last week in April or the first week in May. When those details are confirmed, I'll be sure to share it with you and also send out a press release. And I did do an op-ed that you should have all received that really shares my thoughts and my reflections from the most recent Health and Wellness Forum. And I hope that you all had an opportunity to review that. But again, I was under no illusions that we were going to solve any problems after one meeting, but I did think it was a good discussion. And hopefully we can have a more focused discussion in a couple months when that group and other stakeholders reconvene. If there are no additional reports or announcements, we'll move on to Transportation Funding Work Group. I just wanted to let the council and staff know that I was appointed by Washtenaw County Board of Commission Chair Felicia Breivik to serve on a transportation funding work group that's comprised mostly of county staff, county commissioners, a representative from Watts, I believe 2 representatives from the Road Commission. I represent cities, and I believe there's a new representative representing townships looking at long-term sustainable solutions to our transportation and infrastructure needs countywide. Their first meeting was actually the day of my Health and Wellness Forum, so I was unable to attend, but they meet for the second time this Thursday morning. And again, we've talked ad nauseum about this, how the state essentially has punted, has passed on developing a cohesive and/or long-term solutions to our state's infrastructure needs. And it's becoming increasingly apparent that we need to do something locally and something that will have an impact for a number of years. So there's a lot of ideas and solutions that have been proposed. Obviously, this group has not developed a consensus, but it was an honor to be asked to serve. It's an issue I'm passionate about, and just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And when there are tangible things to report, I will be sure to relay them to this group. If there are no questions on that, then we'll move on to the 150th celebration or sesquicentennial approval of expenses. Mr. Campbell, you want to take the lead on that? And perhaps Mickey, Joe, or City Treasurer Bennett can also comment as the staff liaison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the most recent, I think it was last week, right? Last week had the 150th celebration task force meeting, and one of the questions that, or one of the topics on the agenda, and the question at hand is: so as this task force moves forward in putting scheduling activities and the like, promotions and those types of things, if they have expenses, how do they get it approved? You may recall, or at least those council members that were here last year, when you adopted the budget, there is money budgeted for these activities. And so I suggested at the meeting that since it's been budgeted, it's been approved, that we would follow the same or similar policies as we do with our purchasing policy, that if it's within the city manager's threshold, which is $15,000, that if it's within that, we would continue to follow those guidelines, and sometimes, depending on what it is, it may have to be bid out and those types of things. But otherwise, if it's greater than the $15,000, then it would have to come to council. But of course, the concern would be for majority of expenses, to try and have to bring back to council every time would be pretty awkward, and things wouldn't get done. So that's what I would propose, just as we do with our typical day-to-day operations.
Is there any objection to that? No? Okay, very good. Well, if there's nothing further under the discussion portion of our agenda, we move on now to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
John Olson, Executive Director, Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to come before you guys today, and we are entering into our Saline Salutes period again, and we are up for nominations. As you know, that the Chamber puts that on each year, and that's the way that we honor our citizens, and I'm very passionate about it, and we'd really like to get a lot of people submitting for, we've actually got, we're doing 5 this year. We're doing the Citizen of the Year, the Lifetime Achievement Award, but we've also added someone who's active duty in 2015. We have a number of our young Saline residents who are serving our country. We also have added I'm calling it the Orrin Parsons in honor of a previous resident, for someone who has served at any point in Saline's history. And then we are also adding a First Responder Award for police, fire, or for EMS. So if you guys could get the word out, and let's start getting those nominations in. We've got a couple more weeks which people can submit them, and then hopefully we will have a large crowd there to thank our citizens for what they've done for us.
Thanks, John. Can you remind us again of the deadline to turn in applications?
I was just trying to think of that. I think it's March 11th, yeah.
I do have the Youth of the Year, so I'll pass these out.
That is another one that we get. That one's actually voted on by the schools.
Some great new categories. Appreciate that. Very good. Additional citizen comments? No, then please note that I'm sorry, please.
John Heller, 213 Sheffield. I'd just like to comment on, there's been a number of times where you have protested that the state is taking away your authority to govern or your ability to govern. And it just strikes me that, in regards to the police department, you kind of shy away from actually governing by farming out the investigation to your attorneys, which then is cloaked by attorney-client privilege. You call in a consultant. It seems to me that it would be better if you, as a body, somehow devised a means to actually determine what the issues are at the police department and try and resolve them here. It seems to me it's a contradiction when you're saying, well, the state's taking away our ability to govern, and then you seem to be running away from that ability to govern when you can in regards to the police department. And in that line, I would just say that you had long, detailed discussions about the planners at the main 4 intersection in town. Why can't you have the same kind of discussion about what's occurring at the police department, why it's occurring, and have the public be informed about what is actually occurring there? Thank you.
Additional citizen comments? Well, please note our upcoming meetings on March the 14th, which is just a regular meeting beginning at 7:30. And then on the 21st, of course, we have a regular council meeting also beginning at 7:30, but a 6 p.m. work meeting to discuss the sale of 600 Maple Road. Okay. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to go into closed session to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, in particular to discuss pending litigation with the city's legal counsel. The city council will not reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of closed session. Is there a motion?
Move.
Move to convene by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. The clerk will please call the roll.
Mr. Seal?
Yes.
Ms. Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Gerba?
Yes.
Ms. McClellan?
Yep.
Ms. Terhart?
Yes.
Mayor Morrow?
Yes, and Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes is absent. We are now convened into closed session at 9:09 p.m.